well, tell us first what it's like seeing it for the first time with an audience.
Well, it's exciting, and it's exciting to know what the audience might think about it. Of course, yes. No. Don't you think?
Yes, I was nervous all the time, actually.
It's so engaging, but it's interesting. I mean, Joyce she's a really unique figure, and she's obviously very shy and reticent, and turned you down many times to make this film. And so, what do you think it was that convinced her to do it finally?
I don't know. It's a long story, and I will try and make it short. So I met with Joyce the first time after she had published Blonde. I mean, it's 20 years ago, because now Blonde comes out in a 20th anniversary version. And so I went to see her to make an interview for a Swedish paper and also for Swedish radio. And I went to see her in Princeton, and I think I stayed with her for about 2 hours and then went back to New York. And I remember already on the train from Princeton to New York, I thought I would like to continue our conversation, because it was so good. So I wrote Joyce again and said, would you like to continue this conversation about you and your work? And she said yes. At that time, apart from Blonde, I think I had read 2 of her previous novels. So I started to read. So during the next year, I think I read about 25 novels and some of her short stories collections. And we called, and we also wrote to each other. So I sent her questions, and a couple of days afterwards, she sent long answered. And the result of this was an interview book which was published in Sweden in 2004, and also a new edition 2 years later, because she had written a couple of new books. So when it came out as a pocket book in Sweden, I added, I think, 3 chapters with new books. But then after that, I had this idea that I wanted to make a film about her. And this was our first. We have been working together on, 4 or 5 films now? Yeah. So this was our first project together, and I went to you and told you this. So in 2007, was it?
2007.
Yeah. Together with a Swedish photographer, we went to Joyce Carol Oates' land, I mean up in Lockport and around, and photographed some and met with Joyce. And I suggested her that we should make a film. And she said, no, Stig, no, I'm not good on the camera, no. And I persisted and persisted, and finally...
Yeah, we made 4 films in between.
We made 4 films in between.
2
yes.
about Ingmar Bergman and 1 about Ingrid Bergman.
And Ingrid Bergman,
then
yeah.
she said yes.
And then finally she said yes. So we said immediately, we start filming. Yeah, so we started then 5 days of filming with her. And then we stopped for some time and continued. So that's the backstory, yeah.
I mean, it's so interesting because I'm curious about the sort of mental process you went through in terms of making the movie, because writing is so not a visual medium. I mean, there are shots of her writing, but that's not that interesting. But you're able to really take her writing and make a whole world about it. And so, but how did you come to the filmmaking process that you ended up with on the screen?
Well, I didn't want, because there are some, of course, other films about writers or about famous people here, and especially lots of American documentaries about famous people of different professions. And they film these people, and then they have maybe 10 or 12 or 15 other friends and colleagues to talk about them and give their views. But I wanted to make a very personal portrait with Joyce. I did interview a couple of other persons, among them Edmund White, who is one of Joyce's closest friends, and he's, as you know, a big writer, a famous writer as well. And I interviewed a couple of her pupils at the different universities where she studies. But in the end, we thought, no, we should concentrate only on Joyce and not make this kind of, if I may say, ordinary portrait film. Yeah.
One of the other things I thought you did that was really interesting is you pulled out all the ways that she, has drawn from history. Obviously Marilyn Monroe, the Chappaquiddick, the Detroit riots, and took those visuals and dramatized them. And I thought, so I wondered how you chose those specific examples in terms of those books and bringing them to life on the screen.
Well, I think we can both talk a little bit about that, because we have had many versions of the film until it became this one. So at some point we said we have to concentrate on a couple of books. So we concentrated on the books you saw, which is about, what is it, 8?
We chose actually 10 books, and we chose the kind of books that could maybe tell the whole story of her, in a sense. If she has written 110 books, we were like, I don't know how many hours we have been talking about how to do the script of this film, and what book is the best book to present parts of her life. So it has really been a long, difficult process. And actually, Joyce herself, very early in the process, she said, please don't banalize my life. Because she thinks that documentary films very often just takes this spectacular private things and make a drama story. And she said, if I can choose, I would like you to make an intelligent film about me. If it's possible, don't banalize me. And as a filmmaker, it's difficult because film is conflict. I mean, we make films about conflicts, and she doesn't want to be very private. So we focused on her as a worker, because she's a worker. Sometimes we thought maybe the title should be "Worker," because she's a working woman. She's working very hard. And my impression of her is like she's 90% inside herself. And we can only meet like 10% of her when we have a dinner and talk. So she's so much in her own self. So it's very difficult to make a film about her. And that's why we have this in the start. If you want to meet me, you will find me in my books. And I would say that is the way I have met her, because she is splittered in all these 1 million pages that she has written. So it has been very difficult, I would say, to make this film.
But also,
do you think it's good? Do you like the film? Actually, I'm very curious, because sometimes I say, is it boring? Is it too slow? Is it not happening anything extraordinary in the film?
No, because you're the first audience we are confronting. Yes, but also we chose the books which in some way could give not only Americans but people outside America a picture of the America which Joyce has been going through, like Detroit riots, like what's been happening politically also, because Joyce is a political person as well. And it's also so interesting, her whole career. She was born on a small farm in north of Lockport, up in the state of New York. And as you saw, in a general school where it was just one big classroom and that's it. And she became this fantastic writer. So her career is so remarkable, and we also try to put that into the film, how a young person from a poor district of America can rise to this literary fame. I mean, the fame is thanks to herself, but it's quite a personal story she represents. Yeah.
And I'm her publisher, and so I should know this, but I didn't realize how much she loves to create controversy, and I thought it was interesting that you include her Twitter. I think if anyone follows her on Twitter, she loves to sort of stir things up on Twitter, and I loved that you included some of her tweets in the movie. And but I was thinking as I was watching, because I was thinking about the tweets, but then I was thinking about her first book. Really, in some ways, she really made people mad. And so so she's been doing it her whole career, is what is I think one thing you bring forward in the movie. And so I wondered if you had been thinking about that, if the sort of trajectory of her engagement with people and making them kind of poking at them.
I don't know. I can't say. Of course, to some people she must be controversial because of her view on things and politics in America. But I mean, she stands for them, and I, through her books and also through her. One thing, I mean, which is not in the film, we filmed it several times, but it was very difficult to do, was her as a teacher, because she still loves to teach. And she is, for the moment, teaching in 3 universities, maybe more online than before, but we visited her in San Francisco, and also here in Princeton, and New York. But Joyce didn't want to have us in the classroom, so we were allowed to see her enter the classroom, and in some occasions she let us stay for the first 5 minutes, and then she said, Stig, I think it's time for you to leave. So what we had, seeing her enter the classroom and the students of literature waiting for her, and her first words to them, and we couldn't make so much about it. I wanted, and you wanted too, to show that part of her, because it's really so important for her teaching. Yeah.
I'm sorry that didn't work out, because I'm sort of curious what it's like to be in her class. I noticed that Laura Dern did the voiceover. Can you talk a little bit about how you got her to do that and what the process for that was like?
It took some time.
Do you understand why we chose her? No, because she was. I love this when you try to do a documentary film very authentic. Why you choose an actress? She was in Joyce Carol Oates wrote an essay, Smooth Talk, where Laura Dern, I think she was only, how old was she?
18.
18?
No, she's 15 in the movie, but I think she was 18. It's one of her first parts, a film. The short story which Joyce wrote was called. Well, the film is called Smooth Talk, but it's.
So we thought it doesn't matter, but it was like it was really our first choice, because it makes sense, because she already knows, and she has played some role in Joyce Carol Oates.
And Laura Dern said that Joyce Carol Oates is her hero.
Yeah. So, but we are so happy she did it, and we had to do it in her closet because it was COVID-19. We couldn't go to America, and we had to arrange this. So we built a radio studio in her closet. We didn't build it. It was actually a team coming to her door, leaving the equipment, and they built it for a day. And then we were sitting in Stockholm on Zoom, and talking to her with all her clothes and her hats
around her. Yes,
it was so fun.
Yeah,
and 7 of her agents was like listening on this Zoom because they had to, follow the process. She's very famous and big and needs protection, of course. Yes, but we made it, and I think it became great. So we had 2 hours with her in her closet.
That's great.
Because we also had Joyce reading at certain points, but she doesn't like to read from her own book, so she read very rapidly and without special feeling. So that's also why we wanted to have an actress reading her stuff. It's much better.
But the idea is, in a way, to tell stories more from the inside perspective. That Joyce explains herself through her own words, but we can't interview her all the time. So it's lovely to have Laura Dern's absolutely fantastic voice reading her text. So something happens in the film, some dynamics.
Well, I think that what the reading, the effect that it has is to sort of explicate Joyce without Joyce doing it herself, because Joyce doesn't really want to explain herself. She does it a little bit, but I noticed that you sort of found proof of the things that she said in her writing, and then had Laura Dern kind of confirm them. And I thought that was a really cool way to tell a person's story. Yeah. So.
Okay, that's nice. Yes.
So thank you for doing that. Okay. So can you guys talk a little bit about Movie Man, which is another film at this festival?
Actually, I have to talk about Movie Man.
Yeah.
Because it's my film. No, when Corona started, the famous Corona, you're still sitting with masks. We hadn't finished. We had 1 week left for shooting with Joyce Carol Oates, and suddenly everything closed, and the lockdown came, and Stig, he's in the risk because he's so young. So he had to stay at home, and this man, he's like a living 19-year-old backpacker. He just goes home, change clothes, take his bag, and he leaves for film festivals all the time. You are very active as a person. And suddenly you couldn't travel anymore. And you had to stay at home in this small apartment in Stockholm. And I had this feeling that, shit, maybe I have to save him. Maybe he will be so bored sitting in his own apartment without anyone. I have to keep him company in some way, so I decided to make a film about him. So during Corona, I told Stig, couldn't you please, because he has like books from the floor up to the top.
And DVDs.
Yes, and DVDs. And everything in his home is films. It's only films on the walls, on the floor, everywhere. It's just films. So I said, couldn't you please, if you would choose 10 of the best films for people to see when they have to sit home, and maybe you can call some of your friends. This is a really boring idea. An old man watching films, calling his friends. You can imagine. And I wanted to make, it's a kind of love story from me, because this person that I have worked with for 14 years now, and we know each other very well. And it's my emotional portray of Stig, this film, Movie Man. But it's also a homage. Did you say homage? Homage to all old people that has been sitting alone about isolation. And it's also homage to the film, because the film has been our closest company. Everybody has been sitting at home looking at a lot of films. So I wanted to make this film about creativity and about Stig, old people, isolation, and films. So it's a very happy film, actually. I hope you will see it tomorrow.
But then we have to say it's not just me there, because through the computer, I'm talking to about a dozen of film friends all over the world who are also in the similar situation. So there are a few fairly famous actors,
Joyce Carol Oates,
actors and actresses and film directors. Isabella Rossellini is one of them. She is coming tomorrow to also talk about the movie together with us. And John Sayles,
Olivier Assayas, Alicia
Vikander, the Swedish now superstar, and some other of my old film friends, actors and actresses and directors.
And also a lot of film clips, because I have told the Corona story through 55 clips from films. So it's actually a bag of candy. So I would say it's a happy film about Corona.
Starting with the first film I saw in the evening together with my parents in a Stockholm cinema. I was 9 years old, and I fell in love with the girl on the screen, and also I fell in love with cinema. And after that, I couldn't resist going to see movies in cinemas, and that was a film with Jane Powell, who passed away just 2 months ago or something like that. But she was my first love on the screen. Yeah. So you'll see that as well if you come tomorrow. That is.
It's a great advertisement. Well, it's going to be great. Well, I have one last question, and that is, has Joyce seen the film, and what does she think of it?
She saw it. We sent it to her, and she saw it, a couple of months ago. And she told us both that she was very moved. And it was difficult for her. She said, I don't know if I dare to see it, because Charlie, her second husband, had passed away sometime before. And also, of course, she had the memory of Ray, her first husband, but she saw it and, she liked it.
Glad. Well, thank you so much. This is for making this movie and for bringing us together. It's my first time seeing a movie since the pandemic, so thank you for that.
Oh, that's nice.
Do you have any questions?
Thank you.
I have a comment. I think that I loved all the different techniques, with the typing and all of that, but the humor. I mean, you heard us laughing out loud at certain parts, and that's not an easy thing to do. Her humor came out and was very touching.
Oh, thank you. I love comments, not questions.
Well, I want to say that I had a young patient who was abused brutally and was held in a dungeon, and I wrote Joyce because I thought she would understand. And she wrote me back, and she said, what a marvelous story, because it was a story of struggle and abuse and of recovery. And she loved it, and we had it back and forth for a little while. So she is accessible.
Yeah.
And it because I've followed her most of my life, it was heart-opening to have her write me back.
That's good.
She does love email.
There is.
I came here I signed up for this because I have always heard about Joyce Carol Oates, and I think I started reading one of her books years ago, but I don't think I ever finished it.
Right.
So I said, this seems like a perfect time to learn about her. And I can't thank you enough for encapsulating her life and informing me so brilliantly in such a short period of time. So thank you for your effort.
Oh,
Thank you. Thanks a lot.